Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to Teaching Students How to Make Inferences Through Modeling and Dialectical Journaling. Today we will look in depth at teaching, I'm sorry. Today we will look in depth at teaching one cognitive comprehension strategy, making inferences. And I'll ask, how many of you feel that teaching inferring is one of the most difficult things to do? And audience members will raise their hand. And I'll say, helping students to understand when they are making inferences is challenging, but after today, you should feel more equipped to teach this strategy successfully. Making inferences was developed at the Children's Learning Institute with Texas Reading First funding from the Texas Education Agency, and I've adapted it for us and have included some more information and also to include dialectical journaling as one instructional routine that can be used with teaching inferencing. I'm so happy to be here today. I am Felicia Wilkerson, your ELAR coordinator. The materials that you will need for today's training are in your purple folders. Everything is in order. You have handouts 1 through 7. You'll need your TE. I've provided some text that we're going to use today for modeling and practice, a writing utensil, and your session reflection sheet that's in blue. So please pull out handout 1 and your session reflection sheet as we will use these throughout the session today. Your session reflection sheet could serve as a note-taking sheet for you to write down important ahas as you are during the lesson, the session today, as you are reflecting on your learning. Take a moment to read this to yourself, please. And then I'll provide time for participants to read. And I'll ask, why is this funny? And I'll take answers from the audience. And I'll encourage them to explain and expand on their thinking. And then I'll paraphrase their answer in the following way. So you inferred that the boy was thinking about a VCR or DVD player. The text clues in the joke that helped you to make that inference included the symbols as well as the words fast forward and rewind. You also used your background knowledge of DVD or VCR players. You know that these are the symbols on recording machines and what those symbols mean. So when we infer, we use clues from the text or situation along with our background knowledge. Making inferences help us to achieve deeper understanding of text we read. In their book, Harvey and Goodvis say, inferring is the bedrock of comprehension, not only in reading. We infer in many realms of our lives, and our lives will click along more smoothly if we can read the world as well as text. Inferring is about reading faces, body language, expressions, and tone, as well as reading text. So here I'll engage the audience and ask them what inferences can they make, and I want them to study the comic, and they're going to discuss it at their table. And then I'm going to have a copy of this blown up on a poster, and each table is going to write their inferences on a sticky note and come up and put it on the poster. And then we will share those and then have each person share how they made that inference and what were the clues and what background knowledge did they have to make that inference. So our learning goals are today. Our learning goals for today are to clarify the importance of making inferences, to explore modeling making inferences, practice using our core program TE and dialectical journaling more effectively to teach making inferences, and we're going to plan and practice a strategy instruction lesson for making inferences using dialectical journaling. Before we get started, let's review the pieces of the comprehension puzzle. Now, today we're just going to take a look into inferring, but that's only one piece. The other pieces work simultaneously, and proficient readers use many comprehension strategies at once, and they are reading with a purpose, self-monitoring their own comprehension and making adjustments, making connections, using background knowledge, asking questions, making inferences to create meaning, drawing conclusions, creating sensory images to create meaning or visualizing, clarifying, determining importance, summarizing and paraphrasing, synthesizing, using contextual or morphological clues or word part clues, text structures and story structure, and using fix-up strategies. Everything on this list except text structures are part of our figure are part of our figure 19 standards. I think I'm going to take this one out. Routman says that we're turning out lots of superficial readers. They look and sound competent. They read smoothly and may be able to retell what they've read with some detail, but they're unable to go any further, to discuss characters and why they behave the way they do, or to give a concise and brief summary, or to discuss the theme or big ideas, or talk about the author's purpose or the author's viewpoint. So today we're going to turn our attention to helping students think more deeply about text that they are reading. We will focus on ways to support our students to make inferences as one more piece of the comprehension puzzle. Remember, although we're going to highlight or focus on this one strategy or any one strategy at a time to help clarify and make the strategy explicit, we need to ensure that our students know that strategies don't happen in isolation. We use them automatically, interchangeably, and usually we use more than one at a time. So let's explore, why should we teach our students to make inferences and predictions? So here I'll allow students to discuss with one another and then do a brief share out. A substantial body of research shows that poor comprehenders understand literal or stipulated meanings, but they have difficulty making inferences that require interpretation or integration of text. So in other words, students are better at understanding surface level information, but have difficulty with higher order thinking skills or understanding text at a deeper level. So I'll have students think about that and restate that maybe in their own words, or discuss at the table why they think this is the case, and then do a short share out. We teach students to make inferences and predictions while reading because it helps them achieve deeper understanding of text. In studying the effects of teaching narrative and comprehension strategies just to first graders, Paris and Paris found that teachers can promote strategies for making inferences about character dialogue, predictions, or themes. They can teach children strategies for integrating information, and they can facilitate the generation of higher order questions that help lead to deeper understandings. It is also noted that when proficient readers infer, they are more able to remember and reapply what they have read, create new background knowledge for themselves, discriminate and critically analyze text and authors, engage in conversation and or other analytical or reflective responses to what they read. And that's how I'm going to incorporate dialectical journaling, because you can read a same piece many times and analyze different things. You can analyze the text, the author, you can have engage in conversation and have reflective responses to what they read, and that really incorporates the writing. So why should we teach making inferences and predictions? Well, we've already discuss one reason, it helps us to achieve deeper understanding of every text we read. A second reason is that making inferences and predictions is such a foundational strategy that has been made part of our state curriculum, and we can find it in several of our TEKs. And here I'll allow participants a moment to review the standards. Next, I'll have participants do a Think, Ink, Share activity to discuss the different types of inferences students need to make per our standards, and then discuss different ways for them to know that students are or are making these inferences currently in their classrooms. How does that look right now? And this will be a great activity of this is what I currently do, and then they can get other things throughout the sessions to add to what they are currently doing to add to their learning. Inferring and predicting are also assessed through our state assessment, the STAR. And here are some example questions that require students to make inferences and predictions. So we won't read all of these. I'll just post some of them out, maybe choose 5 in there, and explain that these are all STAR question stems, just to name a few, and how the inferences are made over the whole text, a part of the text, a word in the text, a phrase in the text, author's perspective, all different types of things, because there are so many inferences to be made. And so we'll review some of these STAR question stems that focus on making inferences. Here's another important reason for teaching students to make inferences. When readers infer, they achieve greater satisfaction from the reading experience. In studying the effects of inference training, McGee and Johnson found that when children are explicitly taught inferential skills, the enjoyment of the task of reading is enhanced and is therefore more likely to be undertaken readily, even by students who may have initially found difficulty reading. So in other words, when we are able to think think within and beyond the text, we enjoy it more because we're actively engaged in the text. So when readers infer, we naturally achieve greater satisfaction from the reading experience. And let me see a show of hands of how many of you would love for your students to find reading more enjoyable. Yes, that's what we want. So we have discussed many reasons. We've discussed many reasons why we want to teach the strategy of making inferences. And let's recap those reasons. Making inferences and predictions deepens our understanding. It's a large part of our state standards. It's assessed on STAR. And we have a greater sense of satisfaction when we infer while reading. Now, of these 4 reasons, which one of them is most compelling to you? And why do you think it is important to teach the strategy of making inferences and predictions? So go ahead and get out your handout 1, A Window on My Thinking. And throughout the presentation today, we're going to be completing an exercise called window pane. The paper is divided into 4 quadrants like a window pane, and at various points, we will stop to process the information we've discussed. So let's look at the first square now. And let's reflect on the reasons we teach making inferences and predictions. Write about or draw a sketch that represents the reason that's most compelling to you. And I'll give participants, maybe 2 minutes to complete this strategy or this activity. We've looked at many reasons why it is important to teach the cognitive strategy of making inferences. Today, we want to think about ways to make this instruction even more effective. The term cognitive strategies refers to the thinking processes or the metacognition that proficient readers use automatically to comprehend. When we infer, we create a personal meaning from the text. We combine what we read with relevant background knowledge to create a meaning that is not explicitly stated in the text. Good or proficient readers actively search for or are aware of implicit meaning. Now, notice the word actively search. When we are making inferences and visualizing and doing all those comprehension pieces, it means that we are actively reading and actively searching. Our brains are talking, and we can leave tracks of our thinking through discussions and through writings. I'll explain here that there are over 50 types of inferences that can be made, and so I've summarized some of them here. Inferring includes using context clues to figure out unknown words, predicting outcomes, events, characters' actions, motivations, answering questions that are not explicitly stated in the or answered in the text, creating interpretations or synthesizing or putting together information, drawing conclusions, surface underlying themes because themes are implicit, create interpretations based on text, mental images, and sensory, other sensory images such as hear, taste, smell, feel words, as well as interpreting figurative language, just to name a few. So there's many things for students to infer, and we want to teach. It's important for us to teach inferring because there's so much to interpret in text, and it helps students notice and note these inferences. By using inference, you elaborate upon what you read, draw conclusions going beyond what's written on the page. So student to student discussions, student to teacher discussions, and dialectical journaling, which is just a discussion with the text, are just some ways we can model and get students to demonstrate their abilities to infer, where they make their invisible thinking both audible and visible to themselves, to one another, and to us as a teacher. So at this time, turn and talk to your partner about some strategy or instructional routines that you currently use to get students to elaborate on what they read. Discuss at your table what other things that you do, and then we'll share out in a few minutes. The benefits, let me give you a brief overview of dialectical journaling. I know that many of you, how many of you use some sort of type of journaling in your classrooms? Yes. So many of us already use journaling. Dialectical journaling can take many forms. Usually you can just, some people do a 2-column, some do a 3-column where they put the page number or paragraph number, but it can take many forms. The text is usually on the left side, and the inference or whatever you're analyzing is on the far left side. Dialectical journaling is a relationship and discussion between readers and the text. It's engagement that creates meaning in both fiction and nonfiction. It contains the student's personal reactions, which occur at the moment they are reading. Dialectical journaling can be a before, during, and after activity, but students seem to really enjoy during and after reading. It's a time where they ask questions, make comments, make inferences, and record their ideas to the part of the text that they found interesting. And by the time they have finished, this column represents an intellectual history of their reading experience. And young adolescents need a lot of teacher modeling and a lot of time to practice before they can use this technique independently. The benefits of dialectical journaling is that it slows down the reading process so kids can take notice and reflect. They're just not reading on and on and on and on. They're reading with a purpose, and they're stopping, taking notice, and reflecting and writing their thinking down. It helps readers keep track of their thought processes while reading, and this is important for discussions, writing, and standardized tests, and it can be used for those. A great benefit is that all students can do this in some capacity. It's a great tool for individualized instruction because it does leave that historical documentation of their thinking. The depth of responses will vary, but every student will be able to access every text in some way. It builds confidence for insecure readers and takes proficient readers to new levels of interpretation. And so at this time, are there any questions about dialectical journaling or ways that you have used journaling to get students to show what they know or show their thinking? And then I'll ask that question, and I'll take one or two share outs about that. So when we introduce a new cognitive strategy to our students, we must do so in a way that is direct, systematic, and most of all, explicit. Students should understand what the strategy is and how it helps them to understand. Comprehension instruction should use modeling, thinking aloud, questioning, and other techniques to promote active construction of meaning. We've developed a routine to introduce and practice new cognitive strategies. We use a gradual release of responsibility model to teach our students the use of cognitive strategies. It is important that this instruction incorporates the features of effective instruction, which are explicit instruction with modeling, systematic instruction with scaffolding, multiple opportunities to practice, immediate and corrective feedback. All four of these features are incorporated into the routine seen here on the card. This is handout 2 in your folder. So this routine is a step-by-step process. Let's go ahead and review it now. Please take out handout number 2 and take 1 minute to review the steps. Explicit instruction with modeling, systematic and I will just allow participants 1 minute to read the handout. So tired. Okay. When we introduce a new cognitive strategy, we give it a name, a context, and define it, which are steps 1, 2, and 3 on the strategy instruction card. We use clear and explicit language. Clear and explicit language is key when teaching cognitive strategies to students. And so here is an example by Keene and Zimmerman. Today I want to show you how I infer. I'm going to pause as I read, and I'll share my inferences. Inferences are really important, and great readers make them all the time. An inference is something a reader knows from reading, but the author doesn't include it in the book or the text. It helps you understand the story more deeply and helps make text mean something very personal to you. Colleen Beers puts it another way also. Let's see. Okay. So to answer the question, how do I teach the strategy? So you decide what specific strategies you want to model and what text to use. Next, you'll tell your students exactly what strategy you'll be practicing while reading. Just like we just read from Zimmerman, you begin with a direct statement such as, while I read, I'm going to practice making inferences. Listen to how I use the text clues to think about the text. Read the passage to the students, modeling the strategy you're using. Next, during real reading situations, you give your students multiple chances to practice the strategies you've demonstrated. Readers need time to practice strategic reading with peers while you listen in and coach them as needed. This is, gradual release. You'll continue modeling as students' needs indicate or when the genre changes. And finally, give students opportunities to try the strategy without your coaching and support. This shift from you doing and the students watching to the students doing and you watching is very critical. In step 4 of the cognitive strategy routine, we provide our students with touchstones to help them to remember and use the strategy. These touchstones address many modalities so that our students have a variety of tools to support their learning styles. When a new strategy is introduced, we want to provide a kinesthetic movement or hand motion that helps our students remember the strategy. So I'm going to model a hand motion holding up a pretend magnifying glass to the eye. And when we are modeling this with students, we may say something such as, we may explain to our students that this hand signal represents a detective searching for clues through a magnifying glass or maybe binoculars. When I make an inference in a think aloud, I will use this hand signal so you want to use this hand signal so that your more visual learners will see the strategy in action, and maybe your kinesthetic students may do the signal along with you. But all students may use the signals when they make inferences in their own reading or while listening. That really works great for your younger adolescent kids. You could also use text coding for older students, maybe 6th to 12th grade. They can put an eye or they can draw a little picture of a magnifying glass to text code where they stop and make an inference. In the classroom, we also want to display the posters that contain an icon and maybe some keywords that students will want to use. And I've included the poster on the screen in your purple folder. An anchor lesson is another type of touchstone. An anchor lesson may come before you begin step 1 of the cognitive strategy routine. To provide a shared context for the new strategy, it provides another touchstone for students' strategy use. A lesson plan for this anchor lesson can be found in your handout packet. It's handout number 3. So maybe a sample script for your anchor lesson is for you to come in and slam your books down on the table, cross your arms, and make an angry face. And so I'll demonstrate this. And I'll ask, so how am I feeling right now? And how do you know? And I ask a few participants to share their thinking. And I'll say, you use the clues, slamming my books down, crossing my arms, and making a mad face, together with your background knowledge of what angry people do, to infer that I was angry. I did not explicitly tell you that I was angry. And so that kind of helps students to see that we make inferences all the time. We make them when we try to figure out how someone's feeling, when we try to understand what someone is telling us. We make inferences when watching movies, reading books, or looking things up on the internet. When we infer something, we use clues and background knowledge, the stuff in our head, and we put all that information together to make an inference, and we think deeply about what that information might mean. So in the future, we can refer to this anchor lesson when we discuss making inferences, coming in and slamming books down is not something that your students is going to soon forget. So every time you say, remember when I slammed the books down, students will remember the anchor lesson for making inferences. So we just want to do something that provides an anchor lesson um, to prompt their recall of, oh, that's what an inference is. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Notice the explicit. Let's see. How many of you noticed the explicit language we used? Let's see. Hold on. Oh, yeah. Okay, so at the end of this slide, we will review the anchor lesson that is on handout 3. And so when we go to this slide, we'll say, notice the explicit language used in the anchor lesson. And we're going to continue to use that explicit language as we teach students to make inferences while reading. Sometimes as teachers, sometimes we don't always use the explicit language. We forget because we're the experts. And what we mean by sometimes we don't always use the explicit language. For example, making inferences has sometimes been referred to as reading between the lines. And this can be confusing for kids as this quote, it'll be here. For example, making inferences has sometimes been referred to as reading between the lines. This can be confusing for kids as this quote expresses. In 4th grade, I asked my teacher to show me how she figured out a difficult ending. She smiled and said, Chris, you need to read between the lines. So I skipped happily back to my seat, thinking I had been given privileged information. I opened my book only to find to my disappointment that between the lines was just white space. So telling students to infer or make inferences or read between the lines is not very helpful. We must explicitly model this for students. We must explicitly model for students how to make inferences while reading. Often when we teach these cognitive strategies, okay, no, I won't say that. Okay, so we want to say, so how do we help our students with these skills? If saying things like make an inference, draw a conclusion, read between the lines, if they're not getting that, let's discover and discuss and learn how do we help our students with these skills. Share at your table briefly about, so if that's not explicit enough for students, how do we help our students with these skills? Go ahead and discuss at your table. All right. So research says that how we can, let's see, question, how can we help students learn to make inferences? As their teachers, we can carefully choose texts and preview them to determine areas where we must infer to understand. And then explicitly think aloud the relationships between the text clues, background knowledge, and our inferences. Now I'm going to model this for you in the I do, and this is handout number 4. So let's look at an example from one of our core programs. I have selected this example story called Going Someplace Special by Patricia McKissick, and it comes from our 5th grade Texas Treasures book. I'm going to model how to model inferencing through the use of dialectical journaling with the text from our adoption. You can use any text that calls for inferencing, and dialectical journaling is just one way you can use to have students think and can share their inferences. It allows students to elaborate on their thoughts. They can focus on many things in subsequent readings. It allows them an opportunity to write, and allows for the transaction of thought between the writer and the reader. So we'll probably do a choral read here where we'll read it aloud, or I will do it. No, this is my model, so I will do a read aloud here. Trisha Ann was about to burst with excitement. Crossing her fingers and closing her eyes, she blurted out her question. Mama Frances, may I go to someplace special by myself today? Pretty please. I know where to get off the bus and what streets to take and all. Although it had another name, Trisha Ann always called it someplace special because it was her favorite spot in the world. Please, may I go? Pretty please, with marshmallows on top. I don't know if I'm ready to turn you loose in the world, Mama Frances answered, tying the sash of Trisha Ann's dress. Going off alone is a mighty big step. I'm ready, the girl said, taking a giant leap across the floor. See what a big step I can make? Mama Frances chuckled, all the time studying her granddaughter's face. So here, I'm just going to do a dialectical journal where I put the text on one side that I thought was interesting, and then I have my inference and my commentary on the side. Now, I call this my TIC strategy, T-I-C, text, inference, commentary. Tick, 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 tick. All right, so I thought that Trish Ann was about to burst with excitement. Crossing her fingers and closing her eyes, she blurted out her question. I stopped and made the inference there that Trish Ann was excited and maybe a little nervous about asking her question. Crossing her fingers means she was wishing or hoping she got the answer she wanted. My background knowledge of what people do for good luck, meaning crossing their fingers, helped me to understand this. And here I just kind of made an inference about her mood and maybe what she wanted to get. All right, the second one that I'm going to model, Mama Frances, may I go to someplace special by myself today? Pretty please. I know where to get off the bus and what streets to take and all. So my inference in my commentary is Trisha Ann must not have been able to go to this place by herself. Trisha Ann must not have been able to go to this place by herself before. I think this because she asked if she can go by herself today and explains that she knows the way. Also, I'm thinking Trisha Ann is feeling like she's old enough to go by herself. She asks, so she must think there's a possibility that Mama Frances will say yes. And this seems like it's going to be important to the story, maybe the conflict and the setting. So here I'm predicting that this is probably going to have something to do with the setting and the conflict. And then I'm questioning, I wonder where is her someplace special? So here I'm making inferences and drawing conclusions about many things. And lastly, for another model, I don't know. No, I'm doing two more actually. I don't know if I'm ready to turn you loose in the world, Mama Frances answered, tying the sash of Trisha Ann's dress. Going off alone is a mighty big step. Mama Frances seems nervous or concerned about letting her go. I wonder why. The phrase turn you loose in the world, I think she means she doesn't know if she's ready for Trisha Ann to face the world alone. I think she feels that the world is a mean place sometimes. Going off alone is a mighty big step. I wonder if it's because she's young, or I think it's because of the setting, or maybe because Trisha Ann is African American. I wonder if the setting will have something to do with her being alone. By the author's use of dialect, I think it will, because dialect conveys society. So here I made an inference about Mama Frances' view of the world, inference about the setting, and determining importance. I have to go. Where is it?